Hello and welcome to the FanDuel Punch Out. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Spencer Limbach at Spencer_JL. And I feel like you're holding back right now, like you're about to mock me about. We were just talking about Lonnie Chisenhall. But he would be the ultimate guest for the podcast, would he not?
No, I really want to make arrangements to get him on here so we can pick his brain about a couple things, ask him about that 3 home run game like 3 years ago, and
It was 2 years ago.
maybe watch Big Italy drool over him a little bit. That would be pretty entertaining, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll get myself an autograph before he makes it to the Hall of Fame. But either way, an actual Hall of Fame player we'll start talking about first. Well, maybe not yet, but I tend to think he will be eventually. Chris Sale, got to be your top option today, $12,200. Coming off a pretty good 15 strikeout performance against the Cubs. Now he gets a Seattle team that really struggles against lefties. It's at a pitcher's park, obviously, in Seattle. And, you know, this is a team that just, they don't have much power against lefties outside of Nelson Cruz. So, I mean, for me, he's the top option if you can afford him. And I think it's it's a gift that he's not even the most expensive pitcher on the board.
Yeah, I agree. And the only problem you have with him is that he's going to go up against Felix Hernandez, so he's not favored. But I don't know how much of an issue that is. We've seen Felix isn't himself lately. So these two should go back and forth. I think Sale's still in a fine position to get the win. Obviously, the most strikeout upside of any pitcher tonight, and that's kind of saying a lot because you have Madison Bumgarner, David Price, Johnny Cueto. Yet all those guys aren't in the most favorable situations. They're all on the road, some of them in hitter-friendly parks like Cueto. So you don't really love them. So I think that just kind of builds up the narrative for Sale as your number one option there. So, yeah, if you're paying up, he's my guy as well.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously you can consider all those other guys in GPPs. I mean, Madison Bumgarner does have 26 strikeouts in his last 2 games, both complete games. So he certainly has upside, but at Pittsburgh, there's many more hitters in that lineup that hit lefties well. I'm not saying I'm going to be picking on him necessarily, but almost 13K. I think I'd rather go with a guy like Sale in a better situation. As we look at cheaper options here, not a whole lot of guys that stand out, but you and I were talking about a mid-range guy, Chris Bassitt, $7,600. The guy's been pitching really well recently. Double-digit points in 4 straight games. Only got the win in 1 of them. So, I mean, he's got 6, 10, 7, 6 strikeouts the last 4 games. Now he gets a pretty easy matchup against a Tampa Bay team that's just lost against righties, striking out a lot. So if I'm going down into the middle tier, can't afford a guy like Sale, may as well go ahead and save yourself almost 5K and get a guy like the Bassitt Hound.
Yeah, and I like the nickname too. Yeah, so he's probably the best in this range. If you're building stacks, I know there's some high dollar stacks that you're going to want to maybe squeeze in for tournaments tonight. Being a game at Coors Field, you have the Mets are all jacked up with their salaries, their artificially inflated salaries. So in order to get a couple of them, you're going to need to cut savings. So I think Bassitt makes the most sense in that regard. Tampa just hasn't been that great of a hitting team, especially against righties over the past 2 months, really. And you see Bassitt's recent performance and 6+ strikeouts in his past 4 games. He had a 10 strikeout outing against Houston. Granted, they love to strike out, but still, I mean, all the signs look pretty good for him at this price point, and I really don't see anyone else that I love in that mid-range category. Looking a little above that, you have John Lackey at San Diego. Great position for him against that San Diego offense that's pretty anemic. But you don't love the salary at 9K. I think he's an okay fallback for a cash game, but not someone with upside that you really want in your tournament lineups. I think 14 fantasy points is maybe his ceiling. Could be under that, around the 9 to 10 range. So he's an okay pick that's kind of in between there if you need someone in that range. Don't think he's going to put up a fantasy performance that hurts you, just not a ton of upside.
Yeah, and you like to think that he's going to get some run support because Andrew Kastner has been horrible against lefties, and this lineup littered with pretty good lefties. So definitely like that. And then if you're looking for your cheap guys to stack with, we were looking at a couple of these, some minor league numbers on these guys. Jared Eickhoff, G-Rad. I'm going to call him G-Rad. I like that nickname even if it's supposed to be Jared. But at 3K, Seems like guys got decent strikeout upside. Obviously, a huge park in Miami. $3,000. I mean, that's the guy that you're just going to play. Hope he gets you 5 innings, a couple Ks, and you can load up on those bats we talked about earlier because, Toronto, the Mets, Colorado, whatever team you're trying to stack, none of those teams are cheap, so you're going to need to save as much money as you can at pitcher for those.
Yeah, you have him versus Kendry Flores of Miami. He's 5K, so there's a couple cheap options against pretty bad offenses in that game in a pitcher-friendly park. So take your pick between the two. It might be G-Rad because he's a little bit cheaper there at 3K, so you could just load up at hitters, do anything you want there. So, yeah, maybe for a tournament, if you're building a lot of teams, go with him. Hopefully he gives you about 10 fantasy points.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as we move over here to catcher, actually quite a few options, so I'll give you a couple that I'm looking at. You tell me what you're looking at. Travis d'Arnaud, of course, a GPP option, ton of power at Coors Field, but he's $3,900. He's expensive. Wellington Castillo, I love against a lefty at Great American Ballpark at $3,400. And then another guy a little bit cheaper who season-long numbers have been great, hasn't been particularly good recently, but Yasmani Grandal gets Mike Fiers, who last time I checked was allowing the highest hard hit contact rate of any pitcher in all of baseball. So you get a park shift for these guys.
Wait. He passed Kyle Kendrick in that regard?
I think he did. I'll have to look that up.
That is quite the achievement. I know he was second to Kyle Kendrick for a long time there, but I mean that would be quite the feat if he passed Kyle Kendrick.
I'm gonna find that out while you tell me if there's anybody else you like.
Yeah, I do. I liked all the names that you mentioned, obviously with d'Arnaud and Castillo, if you could fit those guys in, but a couple cheaper picks. You have to kind of like Salvador Perez at 2.3K. I know he doesn't have the greatest numbers against lefties, but once you consider the price for near minimum salary and the park shift in Boston, I think he's a high upside play. Maybe catered more to tournaments because he's seemingly a home run or bust. So just keep that in the back of your mind. But another guy I like for tournaments, and he's borderline cash game playable if you need someone in this price range, is Matt Waiters. He's a switch hitter who hits lefties a lot better than righties, so take that into consideration. And he's against Tommy Malone, who has just been struggling off and on this season. 371 WOBA against right-handed bats, so I really like Matt Waiters in that range. He's probably one of my preferred value plays of catcher if you can't get a guy like d'Arnaud.
Yeah, I definitely like that as well. And I did check it out. Kendrick is not a qualified pitcher, but I brought it down to minimum 100, and it's Mike Fiers 1, Joe Kelly 2, Kendrick 3. So
wow, Kelly passed him too.
Yeah, Joe Kelly over here making a late run at the I don't know what we call this, the opposite of the golden sombrero. I don't know. We'll have to come up with a name for it.
It's like the Razzies in the movies. You have the Oscars, which is the highest award, and then you have the Razzies. These are the Razzies for the pitchers.
It's like the Sacco Bowl, like the from the league. You get the award for actual worst pitcher. So congratulations to all the contenders for this season. Moving over to first base. I know you love Paul Goldschmidt. It's hard not to against a lefty at Great American Ballpark. He doesn't really need to hit a ball that hard to send one into the seats here against David Holmberg. Gives up a lot of fly balls as well. Lucas Duda can be a popular play as well. Was hot before his injury. Now he's come back. It looks like a couple games here. He's missing games here and there. He was day-to-day for a couple weeks there, it seemed like. But $4,600 at Coors Field. We know he's got double dong upside. He hit 3 in a game a couple weeks ago, I think. So he's a guy with a bunch of upside. And then, of course, Joey Votto. Ruby De La Rosa, we know the drill by now. He's great against righties and horrible against lefties. So Joey Votto, you don't love paying this type of price tag for a great cash game play, but, I mean, he might just be the best cash game play tonight.
Yeah, so I have all those guys as 1, 2, and 3 on my board, and here's how I'm looking at it. I think Paul Goldschmidt is the best cash game play. I think he's the top overall play, sitting there at a nice price point, 4.4K. Having said that, Duda, obviously, probably the highest upside play. Geared more for tournaments. You can play him in cash games as well, feel pretty good about it with this park shift. But I think Goldschmidt is the better cash game play. Duda more for tournaments. And then Votto is kind of the wild card in there. I think he's going to have a lower ownership percentage because people are going to be gravitating to those two guys. And Votto is a little bit overpriced considering. Usually you see him in the upper 3K mark. So 4.2K might be a little bit of sticker shock. So he's more of a swerve play. Still really like him. Think you can feel confident in him for cash games and tournaments alike. But I think Paul Goldschmidt is the number one overall.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And then a couple other cheaper guys. Excuse me, Adrian Gonzalez against Mike Fiers, 3,300. Just too cheap for him in that matchup, if you ask me. I like that. And then looking even cheaper, I know there's one guy in particular that you liked.
There is?
Mr. Ankle.
Oh, yeah. I almost forgot about him. I like him so much that I almost blacked out. Yeah, it's Kendrys Morales, 3.1K, switch hitter in Fenway Park against Owens. And I know it's a small sample size, only like 15 innings pitched, but Owens has a susceptibility against righties so far. And that's not much of a surprise that he's pitching in Fenway Park, which is one of the better hitter-friendly environments stacked up against Coors Field and the Rogers Center and places like that. So it's in the same conversation there in Morales. The Royals, with that park shift, they're probably going to do some damage tonight, expecting their run total to be at least 4.5, maybe 4. I really like the Royals offense. I think he's one of the better mid-range picks if you're looking at a little bit of savings, but a guy who could possibly replicate the total of Goldschmidt or Votto, guys like that.
Yeah, and just to throw it in there, their team total is 4.5. So
is it?
Yeah,
awesome.
Nice guess there. Second base options, there's quite a few. You got to like Brian Dozier against the lefty at Baltimore at $3,400. If you're not playing Tanaka, Jason Kipnis, much better hitter than his price tag at $3,300. It is a tough matchup, but it is also a lefty at Yankee Stadium, so I like him for tournaments. You got to like D. Gordon in this matchup at $4,200. I mean, he's a tournament-only play for me at that price tag. Who else are you looking at here at first or second base?
I liked Wilmer Flores. Then I opened up FanDuel, went over to second base, and saw that he's 3,400. So, there kind of goes that play. I thought he would be more, at least below 3K, even with the price increase. So 3.4K, I don't think you can do that, especially now that he's hitting 8th in that order. So I think I'd rather go Dozier, obviously, presenting more upside there. Otherwise, looking down the list a little bit further, I think Colton Wong is one of the better cheap plays there, assuming that he retains his spot in the top half of the order, has been hitting second lately. He hasn't done a whole lot, which is why he's so cheap, but as we said a little bit earlier, Andrew Kashner has been horrible against lefties so far. A 381 WOBA against lefties this season, which is just mind-blowing considering he pitches in Petco Park. So I think he's one of the better cheap plays at second base. Otherwise, if you want someone with a little more upside and a lower ownership percentage for a similar salary, you have Jonathan Schoop at 2.6K against Tommy Malone, who very home run prone, and Schoop, he has the power. So I think he's a nice cheap pick, a way to get some upside here at second base.
Yeah, and throwing in a similar player to that, if he's in the lineup, Aaron Hill at $2,300 against the lefty. David Holmberg also out with a little bit of upside. All right, third base options. Speaking of upside, I'll give you the highest upside guys first, but they're going to be tough to fit. Josh Donaldson, $5,700 against flyball pitcher Hector Santiago. Nolan Arenado at Coors Field against Bartolo Colon and his slow ball, fastball, whatever you want to call it. And then you got to like Miguel Sano at Baltimore against lefty and Chen, who also allows a lot of fly balls at 4K. So expensive options there, but all three of those guys could be in line for monster games tonight.
Yeah, I think my favorite per dollar pick might be Daniel Murphy at 4K, sitting there in that Coors game. He's just been pretty solid lately.
Yeah.
Multiple hits in the past two. He had a homer last game at Baltimore. So I think he just has that high floor, high ceiling combination that you're looking for, and he's $1,000 less than Arenado. So I think, he's one of those picks that I might be gravitating to in all formats. But third base overall is kind of tricky. I mean, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of different routes you can go, and most of these guys have high upside. So if you whiff on one of them and the other guy hits a home run, I don't know. It's just kind of a risk-reward like that tonight. You like Manny Machado against Tommy Malone, 4.1K. Otherwise, dipping down, Matt Carpenter, We said Andrew Kashner really bad against lefties. He might not have the same upside as those guys above, which is why I might pay more for Murphy, Machado, or Arenado, but still someone to consider for cash games. He's going to put up a solid total likely. And then Juan Uribe, another cheaper way to get exposure to that Colorado game, sitting at 3.4K. Obviously, you'll want to check where he's at in the lineup to see if he's even in the lineup, because sometimes they switch him out for the platoon advantage there in the DH spot. So if he's in with a fine lineup spot, he's someone to consider as well.
Yeah, I'll throw out one more guy around that similar mid-price range. Justin Turner has actually been hitting righties better than lefties this year.
Yep.
Mike Fiers hard contact rate, 3,300 for him. Derek Dietrich still hitting the ball well. $3,000 for him, I think, is a fine price as well. And then as you're looking at cheap guys, I know you mentioned earlier Martin Prado at $2,400. Picking on the young pitcher. Had a big game last night. He's been pretty consistent recently. So $2,400 near minimum salary for a guy in a solid matchup. That's definitely a way you might want to look in your tournaments.
Good lineup spot too, and I don't really see anyone else down in the bargain section for third base. So if you need a cheap filler, I think he's your guy.
Definitely. Shortstop options. You always love Carlos Correa when he's facing anything but an elite pitcher, and obviously Brett Anderson, a lefty, he kills lefties. Anderson, an okay pitcher, but Correa with big upside. Tulowitzki has not been very good, but his price is down to $3,800. So if you think that Toronto gets to Hector Santiago, maybe give him a look at a cheaper price tag than we're accustomed to with him. But I think, like you were mentioning with third base, that seems like the spot to pay up. And as far as the infield, save money maybe at second base and shortstop. So with that being said, I like Eugenio Suarez at home, despite the fact that De La Rosa is tough against righties. He's had a nice floor recently. He's got upside, so I like him. And then, you got your same cheap guys you always have. Your Alcides Escobar and Johnny Peralta, another one of those guys. $2,400, you don't like the ballpark, and he hasn't been good, but he's a much better hitter than a near minimum salary guy.
Yeah, I think Alcides Escobar is going to be my pick tonight. Kind of as the default punt option as of late. He has a righty-lefty matchup in Boston against Wade Miley, so you got to like that. And as we said, this Royals offense, they're probably going to do some damage tonight, and you like if Escobar gets on base, he could score a couple runs. Yeah, definitely like him tonight. I think I'm just going to pencil him in and then kind of move on and spend at other positions.
Yeah, is he your favorite Escobar? Is the question.
I know exactly what you're getting at, that you want me to mention Eduardo Escobar, who I was high on the other day in the early slate at Yankee Stadium. And as it turns out, I was one day off in that pick because he went bonkers last night with a double, a home run, 2 RBIs, 2 runs. Yeah, he's someone you could consider for a tournament because he is swinging the bat well. Switch hitter going up against the lefty today. You don't love the matchup against Chen. You don't love the batting order because he's like 8th or 9th usually. But yeah, I to answer your question, long story short, Alcides Escobar is my favorite Escobar today. But yeah, you could look towards Eduardo if you really want to.
Yeah, I mean, as far as men's salary upside, if you need an absolute bare minimum guy, there's really no one else with his upside. So
wait, did you say Eduardo Escobar has upside, like home run upside?
I mean, apparently, because the numbers I'm seeing, I didn't actually physically see him hit that home run, but the internet keeps telling me that he did, so he must have.
Because you were knocking me the other day saying he couldn't hit a home run, and 2 days later, there you go.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say I was wrong. I was misinformed.
That day you weren't wrong, but
that day I was not wrong. Exactly. So maybe today I won't be wrong on something also. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe if I'm lucky. But I don't think I am wrong in saying that Carlos Gonzalez has got to be your top play in the outfield at $5,000 against I wouldn't say that Bartolo Colon's a shell of his former self, but he's not the pitcher that he once was. But at $4,900, well, I think we'll probably see a lot of people on Yoenis Cespedes, and I think he's a fine play, but I still much prefer Bryce Harper at $4,900 against Jimmy Nelson, who struggles against lefties. So that's my swerve in the outfield if I'm paying up. I prefer Harper to Cespedes, but I think Carlos Gonzalez is still your top option.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, but you saying Bartolo Colon and Shell in the same sentence gave me this visual that an awesome Halloween costume for him would for him to be Bowser from Mario. Just put his shell on his back and he just like hunch over like this. Like
that would be incredible.
I might tweet him that because I
would
pay money to see him in a Bowser costume.
I'll throw down on that. Yeah, just get a Kickstarter going because Bartolo
Yeah.
seems like he's got a sense of humor. I mean, we've seen him try to swing a baseball bat, so he obviously has a sense of humor.
And carry the bat to first base with him as he
Yeah,
rounds out.
yeah, exactly. But I like
Hey,
that.
and we might see him hit tonight too, so that'd be
We'll
pretty
see him
sweet.
try
And
to
of
hit.
course, there you go.
Yeah, maybe he fouls one off. It'll be fun.
Yeah. So yeah, other outfielders that I do like tonight. Lorenzo Cain, you like him, the park shift, 4K in the outfield. But there's a lot of guys in this same range that I like. AJ Pollock, righty lefty matchup against Holmberg. You like that? You don't love the price. Maybe if he was like $500 cheaper, that would be an easier pick, especially when you have another guy like Michael Brantley in Yankee Stadium at 4.2K. I know he's up against Tanaka, but I mean, Tanaka, he's one of those pitchers that's good overall in terms of, not giving up too many runs at a time, but he also gives up a lot of deep balls. So I think Brantley could take advantage of that park shift in Yankee Stadium. And then you have Mike Trout. Granted, he's against David Price, but he's 4.4K. That's a huge discount. Obviously, more of a tournament pick there, but yeah, someone you also have to consider. Then looking down the list a little bit further, I think one of my favorite outfielders today, assuming he's in the lineup, and he should be, is Kelly Johnson. They usually like to put him up in against a righty, batting fifth or sixth. And yeah, he crushed in Coors Field earlier this year as a member of the Braves. So 3.2K. He's one of the cheaper ways to get exposure to the Mets today, who have a 5.5 run total.
Yep.
So that's
Huge.
the highest that we've seen all week, pretty much. Yeah, you really have to love them, and I think yeah, the price point, you just can't argue with it.
Yeah, not at all. And then a couple of $4,700 guys, Charlie Blackmon and Curtis Granderson, you're of course considering them. A guy I like in tournaments is Starling Marte at $3,200. He does it all. It is against Madison Bumgarner, who nobody seems to be able to hit right now, but I like him in tournaments as a one-off. I'm certainly not stacking against him. And then you look at cheaper guys. I mean, we talked for the show, Michael Kadire is only 3K. We know he's been a better hitter before in his career, but I think he's about 37 years old now. Has been pretty bad since returning from injury. So he's in play because he's a cheap bat in Coors Field, but not a guy that you have much confidence in. One more guy whose price continues to drop. He also hasn't been very good, but Brett Gardner, $2,900. It's a tough matchup against Carlos Carrasco, but really cheap there. Jay Bruce, another one of those guys, a lefty against De La Rosa at Great American Ballpark. I like him
Tournament
as well.
pick.
Yeah.
Tournament pick.
Yeah, tournament only. Do not play him in cash games.
Yep.
Thanks for saving me the embarrassment there. Andre Ethier is another guy that I like at $2,700, assuming he bats fourth or fifth, which he should. Nice ballpark for him at Minute Maid. And as we're looking at really cheap guys, there's really nobody that stands out. So, I mean, it's going to be tough. Maybe we wait for these lineups to come out, see who gets some solid lineup spots. But a couple of cheap guys, I'll save your favorite guy for you there, batting at Great American Ballpark. But if Byron Buxton's leading off again at $2,400, I think he's a fine option. And then there's another guy at $2,400 I know you like.
Yeah, I like Yasmani Tomas at 2,400. I think he's going to have a nice lineup spot, usually batting fifth or sixth for the D-backs, and he hasn't done much lately, but he has that upside. I mean, we've seen it before. He actually has multiple hits, 5 in the last 10 games, so that's not horrible. But, yeah, no, if you need a cheap filler there, I think he's one of the better options. Otherwise, you could look towards Buxton, same price, 2.4K. I'm just not a huge believer right now. Especially against a pretty decent pitcher in Chen. I think he can, do enough to, kind of confuse Buxton and, keep him off base for the most part. But otherwise, you have one more pick down here. Absolute minimum, Alex Rios. I know you don't love the lineup positioning towards the bottom of that KC order, but as we said, 4.5 run total for this Kansas City offense. They should be flying through the lineup like no one's business tonight. So that kind of makes you feel a little bit better that they will roll over enough times for Rios to get his 4 at-bats and maybe have some upside with the better hitters in the top of the order hitting behind him.
Yeah, I like that call. And then one more power bat for cheap, recently called back up. Marcelo Zuna has an extra base hit in each of his last 3 games, homers in his last 2, $2,400. Nice cheap source of power. And, I mean, that's a lineup that's been sneaky decent.
Did you see his home run last night that went off the top of the foul pole?
No.
It was so awesome. He hit one down the left field line, and it literally hit straight on top of the foul pole and then bounced over.
I'm gonna have to look that one up. I gotta find the vine of that.
How big is the foul pole? Like, it's just a little bit bigger than the
That
actual
big,
baseball.
maybe?
Like,
Yeah.
what are the odds that you land it straight on top of the foul pole?
Probably about the same odds as Randy Johnson hitting a bird.
Yeah,
Not very good.
It's definitely one of those. It was pretty awesome.
I'm gonna have to check that out. If I find that, I'll send that out on Twitter as well. All right, That'll do it for us here today. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.